June 28, 2008, Lee Ferguson IV, 17 years old, was supposed to be making memories that day. He was there with friends from Okie Springs Baptist Church, his parents not far behind. Everyone soaking in the thrill and laughter that filled the air at Six Flags Over Georgia. Was the kind of young man people gravitated toward. A constant smile on his face, a hand always ready to help, a dreamer on the basketball court and a scholar in the classroom. His life, so full of hope and momentum, felt unstoppable. The day unfolded in a blur of roller coasters, games, and the kind of happiness that feels endless. Among all the rides that Six Flags offered, one called to them louder than the others: Batman, the ride. A monster of steel and speed, famous for its roaring loops and heart-stopping twists. It was the kind of ride that dared you to conquer it. But somewhere in that rush of excitement, something went wrong. And one of his friends found themselves separated from the rest of the group, wandering into a restricted area, a place hidden from public view, fenced off with warnings and signs that screamed danger. No one knows exactly why decided to cross those 2 6-foot barriers. Some say he was trying to retrieve a lost hat. Others think he was searching for a shortcut back to the parking lot. Maybe it was just a split-second decision, the kind teenagers make all the time, never expecting consequences so heavy, so final. Whatever the reason, in those few moments, stepped into the shadow of death. Beneath the tangled web of Batman's track, the air roared with the sound of speeding steel. At nearly 50 miles per hour, the coaster raced by, a blur of yellow and black fury. Was in its path. There was no warning, no time to scream, no chance to escape. In an instant, he was struck. The impact was devastating, merciless. Witnesses stood frozen, their screams catching in their throats, unable to believe what they had just seen. A young man who had laughed and smiled moments earlier, now gone in the blink of an eye. A Marietta police officer, off-duty but nearby, immediately called for help. Park security and rescue teams raced to the scene, but it was already far too late. Ferguson was pronounced dead where he lay. The violent finality of it, too much for many to even process. As investigators combed through the wreckage of that terrible moment, they found the warnings, the clear signage, the barriers meant to protect. They found no mechanical failure, no negligence on the part of the ride itself, only a terrible, tragic mistake, one that cost a brilliant young life. The coroner confirmed what everyone already feared. had died from blunt force trauma. His death was ruled an accident, but to those who loved him, there was nothing accidental about the gaping hole he left behind. His father, shattered and searching for meaning, spoke about his son's vibrant spirit, how Asia could brighten a room with his laughter, how he dreamed of college, of basketball glory, of a future he would never get to live. Friends wept, remembering the boy who was always there to lift them up, who played with heart on the court and studied with determination in the classroom. A boy full of kindness, ambition, and the rare kind of light that doesn't come along often. Six Flags shut down Batman. The ride in the days that followed, a gesture of respect that felt hollow against the enormity of the loss. Investigators ordered inspections, demanded changes, insisted that the barriers be made higher, the warnings louder, as if more signs could mend a broken heart or bring back the boy who had hopped a fence thinking he was invincible. Yogesh Patel, a 25-year-old from Oak Forest, Illinois, had set out with his family to enjoy a day of adventure in the Great Smoky Mountains, a place known for its rugged beauty and stunning landscapes. The Smokies, the most visited national park in the U.S., are a magnet for those seeking to explore waterfalls, swimming holes, and scenic views. Among the many attractions was Midnight Hole, a deep, picturesque pool beneath a 6-foot waterfall, a place people flocked to, drawn by the beauty of the water and the thrill of leaping from the surrounding rocks. On September 14th, Yogesh and his family arrived at Midnight Hole. The water was crystal clear, the kind of place you'd want to dive into, especially on a warm afternoon. They weren't the only ones there. Others swam, laughing, enjoying the serenity of the park. But what should have been a peaceful day quickly spiraled into something far darker. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Yogesh stepped onto a log that extended over the water. Whether it was to get a better view or just to embrace the moment, no one could know for sure. But what happened next unfolded in a heartbeat. Yogesh slipped. One moment he was standing, the next he was falling, plunging into the cold, deep water below. The shock of the fall hit him hard, and the current took him almost instantly. The pool, which reaches depths of 18 feet, was deceptively dangerous, and before anyone could fully react, Yogesh was struggling. His family and bystanders rushed to help, frantic, but the water was unforgiving. His arms flailed. His body fought the current, but there was nothing they could do. He was disappearing beneath the surface, and no one could reach him in time. At approximately 7:30 p.m., a desperate call went out to emergency services. Within 30 minutes, rangers and rescue personnel arrived at the scene, but the darkness had already begun to fall, turning the situation into a nightmare. Visibility was almost gone, and with the fast-moving water, their search was hindered. The rescue team had no choice but to pause the operation for the night, leaving Yogesh's family to endure a heart-wrenching, agonizing wait in the darkness. They could only hold on to hope. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke, the search resumed with a renewed sense of urgency. A team of 43 emergency responders from North Carolina and Tennessee was dispatched to aid in the recovery effort. Divers descended into the frigid water, meticulously combing the pool where Yogesh had last been seen. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last, but the pool offered no answers, no sign of his body. By early afternoon, time had already run out. The divers found him. Yogesh's body was discovered submerged 18 feet below the surface, lifeless, swallowed by the very beauty that had drawn him in. The recovery was completed by 1 p.m., but it didn't bring closure. It only left a grief-stricken family, broken by the suddenness of the loss. Yogesh's drowning at Midnight Hole was a sobering reminder of the dangers lurking in nature's seemingly serene corners. Despite the allure of the water, Midnight Hole had been the site of multiple tragedies before, with others falling to their deaths or suffering serious injuries. The park had long warned about the unpredictable nature of its waters, urging caution to anyone who considered swimming there. Still, for all the warnings, the water claimed another life that day. In the aftermath, park officials again reminded visitors of the risks, emphasizing water safety. But for Yogesh's family, those warnings came far too late. What should have been a day of fun and adventure had turned into a heart-wrenching loss that would never be undone. In January 2013, Sarai Sierra, a 33-year-old mother of two from Staten Island, New York, embarked on her very first solo trip abroad. Fueled by her deep passion for photography, Sarai set her sights on Istanbul, Turkey, a city bursting with culture, history, and architectural splendor. She longed to capture its energy through her lens, turning inspiration into art. For Sarai, this wasn't just a vacation. It was a dream, a personal quest, and a bold adventure into the unknown. Originally, she planned to travel with a friend, but when those plans fell through at the last minute, Sarai chose to go alone. She didn't let fear or uncertainty hold her back. She embraced the opportunity, trusting that the world was as beautiful and open as she hoped to find it. For days, she wandered through ancient alleyways and busy bazaars, photographing domes, minarets, and quiet corners of everyday life. Her camera was her constant companion, her way of seeing the world and sharing it. Throughout her stay in Istanbul, Sarai remained in close contact with her loved ones. She sent messages, video chatted with her children, and posted photos and updates on social media. Her family felt reassured by her frequent communication, by her joy, and by the sense of wonder in her words. She was happy, thriving, doing something just for herself. But on January 21st, the day she was scheduled to fly home, Sarai never arrived at the airport. She didn't board her flight. She didn't call. She simply vanished. Her disappearance triggered immediate alarm. Her husband, Stephen Sierra, and her brother, David Jimenez, flew to Istanbul to search for her. They worked alongside Turkish authorities, distributed missing person flyers, and retraced her steps. Istanbul, which had once been a place of artistic inspiration, was now the epicenter of a desperate search for answers. The investigation gained international attention. Surveillance footage showed Sarai alive on January 21st, captured by security cameras in a food court and walking down a street. She wore the same outfit in which her body would later be discovered. Clues were scarce. Her belongings, passport, clothes, phone charger, and medical cards were still in her rented room, suggesting she hadn't intended to leave permanently. 12 agonizing days passed before the truth was uncovered. On February 2nd, Sarai's body was found near the remnants of the ancient city walls in Istanbul's Sarayburnu district. The area, frequented by tourists during the day, had become the scene of a horrifying crime. Sarai had suffered a fatal blow to the head. A blanket found nearby suggested she had been moved after death. Her family's worst fears had come true. What was supposed to be a personal journey of growth and creativity had ended in a nightmare. Turkish authorities launched a sweeping investigation. They questioned 9 suspects and pored over DNA evidence. Eventually, a breakthrough came. A homeless man named Ziya Tasala was arrested. Under interrogation, he confessed. He admitted to approaching Sarai as she took photos near the city walls. When she resisted his advances, he struck her with a rock. His DNA matched evidence found at the scene. In June 2014, he was convicted of Sarai Sierra's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her death stunned both Turkey and the United States. Sarai had been a careful traveler, a devoted mother, and a woman simply following her passion. Her murder cast a harsh spotlight on the dangers faced by solo female travelers around the world. Sarai Sierra never made it home, but her story lives on, not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to courage, creativity, and the deep yearning we all share to explore and experience the world. On August 7, 2016, Michelle and Scott Schwab of Kansas packed up their 4 boys for what was supposed to be a perfect family day. Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City was hosting its Elected Officials Day, a tradition where lawmakers and their families got free entry. The kids were ecstatic, their excitement buzzing in the air. None more so than Caleb, the Schwab's 10-year-old son. He couldn't wait to dive into the water slides. But what should have been a day filled with laughter would turn into every parent's worst nightmare. A monstrous water slide towering at 168 feet and 7 inches. So tall it claimed the title of the world's tallest. It wasn't just a ride, it was danger dressed up as fun. Verrückt was the brainchild of Jeff Henry, the park's co-owner, a man with a bold vision but little formal training in engineering. Still, the slide opened to fanfare, and without any age restrictions, despite experts once recommending that only those 16 and older be allowed to ride. So when Caleb and his 12-year-old brother Nathan begged their parents to let them try it, there seemed no reason to say no. The 2 brothers climbed the endless 264 steps to the top. Nathan went first, rocketing down the massive structure while Caleb waited, practically vibrating with anticipation. Then came Caleb's turn. The raft he boarded was designed for 3, and Caleb, barely 73 pounds, sat up front, with 2 much heavier women seated behind him. No one realized it then, but the uneven weight distribution was setting the stage for catastrophe. The raft launched down Verrückt's first 17-story drop, hurtling faster and faster. As it hit the second hill, everything went wrong. The raft went airborne, violently. Caleb was thrown out of his seat, slamming into the metal support netting above. The impact was immediate, brutal, and final. Witnesses could only watch in helpless horror as Caleb's small body was torn apart in midair, leaving a sickening trail of blood along the ride. At the bottom, Nathan waited, smiling, until he looked up. He saw his brother's body fall from the sky. Nathan's scream shattered the air. Michelle, their mother, ran frantically toward the slide, desperate to reach her son, but was stopped by horrified witnesses who knew there was nothing left to see. Emergency crews rushed to help the two women who had been riding with Caleb, but for the Schwabs, the world had already stopped spinning. They left the park in a daze, numb, shattered, their family forever torn apart. In the weeks that followed, a chilling picture emerged. Verrückt had been built not with precision engineering, but with reckless trial and error. During testing, sandbags frequently flew off the rafts, a massive red flag that went ignored. Videos of these dangerous tests even went viral online before Verrückt opened to the public. Still, the park insisted the ride was safe. 13 people, it turned out, had already been injured before Caleb ever stepped onto that raft. It should have never happened. It was all preventable. In early 2017, the Schwab family reached a settlement of around $20 million. Verrückt was dismantled piece by piece. The park itself shuttered for good in September 2018, the screams of thrill-seekers forever silenced. Criminal charges were filed against Jeff Henry and others, including second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. But even those charges eventually crumbled in court. Allegations of illegally obtained evidence meant the people responsible walked away free. It was supposed to be a peaceful family hike, one last winter adventure before the year ended. On December 27, 2018, Dr. Llaya Janney, her husband Tyke, and their 3 young sons set out along the Porters Creek Trail in Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The trail was familiar, well-traveled, and considered safe, nothing out of the ordinary. They walked side by side, unaware that with every step forward, they were moving closer to an unthinkable tragedy. Llaya was a 42-year-old pediatrician from Plano, Texas. She had dedicated her life to caring for children, working tirelessly at Cook Children's Clinic in Fort Worth since 2007. Colleagues spoke of her warmth, her brilliance, and the deep compassion that seemed to radiate from her. At home, her world revolved around her 3 boys and the man she loved. That day, she walked the trail surrounded by everything she held most dear. Then the wind changed. What began as a calm afternoon shifted without warning. The breeze turned into a roar. Fierce gusts ripped through the forest, shaking trees and whipping leaves into the air. The family pressed forward, trying to stay together. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A towering tree, weakened by the relentless wind, groaned and snapped. It was falling, fast, and in the worst possible direction. In that split second, Llaya saw what was about to happen. Her youngest son, 6-year-old Gibran, stood directly in the tree's path. There was no time to call for help, no time to scream, just one instinct: protect her child. Without hesitation, she threw herself over him, wrapping her body around his small frame, shielding him from the impact. The tree crashed down with a deafening thud. Llaya took the full force. The weight and momentum were too much. Her body absorbed the brutal blow, one that would have crushed her son instantly. She died there on the trail, in a final act of pure, unthinkable love. Gibran, though injured, survived. His leg was broken in 2 places. He had cuts and bruises on his head, but he was alive because his mother gave everything to make sure he would be. Rescue teams rushed to the scene. Park officials responded swiftly, airlifting Gibran to the University of Tennessee Medical Center. Surgery followed, and doctors were hopeful. Physically, he would recover. Emotionally, the road ahead was long and heartbreakingly quiet without Llaya. Tyke, now a grieving husband and the sole parent of 3 boys, had to find strength he never knew he had. In the aftermath of the tragedy, as they returned home to Texas, one more cruel twist awaited. Somewhere on their flight, a GoPro camera, one that held the final photos and videos of their family trip, the last images of Llaya alive, was lost. Desperate, the family launched a public plea, praying for a miracle. Social media picked it up. Strangers shared their story, and somehow, the camera found its way back to them. It didn't bring her back, but it gave them something. A glimpse, a memory, a piece of her they could still hold on to. Llaya's final moments weren't marked by fear or panic. They were defined by courage, by a love so fierce it defied instinct, logic, and even survival. She didn't just die in that forest. She saved a life, and in doing so, she left behind more than just grief. She left behind a legacy of unimaginable strength. Eva Louu, a bright 21-year-old from Naperville, Illinois, had just wrapped up an intense academic journey. She'd earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she was on the cusp of beginning a promising new chapter, her dream job as a software engineer at Microsoft. But before diving into the working world, Eva wanted one last carefree adventure, a chance to breathe, to explore, to celebrate. On June 14, 2023, she set out on a trip to Germany with her close friend and fellow classmate, Kelsey Chang. One of the highlights, a hike to the breathtaking Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, a fairy tale fortress nestled in the Alps and one of Germany's most iconic landmarks. That day, under a clear blue sky, the two friends made their way toward the Marienbrücke Bridge, a narrow footbridge suspended 300 feet above a gorge. From there, visitors can take in panoramic views of the majestic castle and the surrounding mountains. It was supposed to be a day filled with awe and joy, but it turned into something unimaginably dark. While hiking, the two women met another traveler, 30-year-old Troy Philip Bowling, an American who struck up friendly conversation. He seemed harmless enough, knowledgeable about the area, and even suggested they follow a less traveled path for an even better view, a hidden spot that promised picture-perfect selfies. Trusting his suggestion, Eva and Kelsey agreed. But as they ventured farther from the main trail, things began to feel off. The path grew more secluded, and the air heavier with unease. And then, everything changed. Without warning, Bowling turned violent. He shoved Eva to the ground and tried to undress her, his intention clear and horrifying. Kelsey, seeing her friend in danger, immediately jumped in to help. In the chaos that followed, Bowling overpowered her, choking her until she lost consciousness, then pushing her down a steep 50-meter slope. Kelsey survived the fall, sustaining serious injuries, but she was alive. Bowling then returned to Eva. He strangled her until she passed out, sexually assaulted her, and coldly pushed her over the edge. Her body, already battered from the attack, could not survive the fall. The vibrant young woman, full of promise and excitement for the future, was gone. Rescue teams arrived on the scene and found Kelsey injured but responsive. Eva, in critical condition, was airlifted to a hospital. But tragically, she died overnight from her injuries. What should have been a joyful memory became a nightmare etched in horror. Bowling tried to flee but was arrested shortly after. His trial revealed even more disturbing details. Investigators found child sexual abuse material on his devices, and the court confirmed that neither Eva nor Kelsey had known him before that fateful encounter. Bowling pled guilty to murder and sexual assault. His lawyer claimed the attack was spontaneous and that Bowling was ashamed of his actions, but the charges, including murder, attempted murder, and possession of child abuse imagery, left little room for leniency. In Germany, a murder conviction can mean life in prison, and few would argue he deserves anything less. This tragic story is a chilling reminder. Even the most picturesque destinations can hide unthinkable dangers. March 24th, 2022 was supposed to be a day filled with laughter. It was spring break, and 14-year-old Tai Samson had made the trip to Orlando, Florida, to enjoy a few carefree days at Icon Park. But Tai wasn't just any teenager. At 6 feet 5 inches tall and 383 pounds, he was a giant among boys, earning the nickname everyone who loved him used with a smile, the Gentle Giant. With dreams of a future in football and a heart as big as his frame, Tai was the kind of young man who lit up a room with his easygoing charm and quiet strength. That afternoon had been filled with jokes, selfies, and the kind of joy that only comes when you're young and the world feels endless. Yet, under the surface, there were warning signs. Tai had already been turned away from 2 rides because of weight restrictions. A disappointment, sure, but one he took in stride. Then came the Orlando freefall. The ride towered above the park, a monster of steel and sky, 430 feet into the clouds, promising a 400-foot plunge at speeds reaching 75 miles per hour. New, dazzling, and dangerous. Tai approached it with caution. Something didn't sit right. Photos, taken just moments before the ride began, tell a story that words could never fully capture. Tai, sitting uneasily in his seat, the harness looking strained, looking wrong. He felt it too. He turned to a friend and said the words no child should ever have to say. "Tell my parents I love them." The ride launched upward, a slow climb into the heavens. For a few breathless moments, everything was still. And then, as the drop began, the nightmare unfolded. Tai slipped, clutching, grabbing, fighting against gravity itself, but it was no use. In a horrifying instant, he fell. When he hit the ground, silence fell over Hton Park. A silence that screamed louder than anything else. Emergency responders rushed in, but it was already too late. Tai was pronounced dead at the hospital. The autopsy revealed the cruel finality of it. Blunt force trauma, multiple devastating injuries, too severe to survive. In the days that followed, the horror only deepened. Investigators discovered that Tai's seat had been manually tampered with. The sensors, which should have prevented the ride from operating if the restraint wasn't properly secured, had been altered, tricking the system into thinking everything was fine when it wasn't. There was a gaping, deadly space between Tai and the harness, hidden by a lie in the machine's brain. And then there was the weight limit, 286 pounds. Tai, at 383 pounds, exceeded it by nearly 100, a critical limit that had never been enforced, never even explained to him. His parents, shattered beyond words, filed a wrongful death lawsuit, demanding answers, demanding change. They learned what no parent should ever have to face, that their son had been failed by every safeguard meant to protect him. On what would have been Tai's 15th birthday, friends, family, and strangers who had come to know his story gathered to honor him. They released balloons into the sky, each one carrying prayers, tears, and the memories of a boy who should still be here. State Representative Geraldine Thompson vowed that Tai's death would not be in vain. She pushed for the Tai Samson law, legislation to ensure that amusement ride safety could never again be treated so carelessly. A settlement was reached in 2023 between Tai's mother and Hton Park, but the fight is not over. The case against the manufacturer of the ride presses on, with a jury trial set for January 2025, a courtroom where Tai's voice, stolen so young, will finally be heard. They were just passing through. A few backpackers, deep in the wild stretch of the Great Smoky Mountains, making their way through the dense, isolated beauty of Hazel Creek. It was September 11th, 2020, and everything about the morning felt still, almost too still. When they spotted an unoccupied tent at Campsite 82, they thought little of it. Maybe the camper had wandered off for water. Maybe they were hiking nearby. Nothing seemed wrong, until they went a little farther. Down by the creek, something stopped them cold. A bear, and something else. Something horrifying. The group didn't wait. They turned and raced back the way they came, hearts pounding, minds trying to process what they'd just seen. When rangers and wildlife officers arrived, their worst fears were confirmed. A 240-pound black bear was still there, scavenging near the body. The scene was brutal. The earth near the tent was torn up with drag marks, streaks of blood in the dirt. Something violent had unfolded here, something fast, something fierce. The body, badly decomposed and nearly unrecognizable, belonged to Patrick Madura. He was 43, from Elgin, Illinois. He had come out here alone, likely seeking peace. Hazel Creek was known for that kind of escape, remote, pristine, and untouched by the noise of civilization. It was a place where people went to lose themselves, to breathe deeply and listen to the silence. But for Patrick, it had turned into something else, something unimaginable. The autopsy told the rest of the story. Puncture wounds, deep lacerations to his neck, head, chest, and limbs. Signs of a violent struggle, fractured ribs, hemorrhaging, the kind of injuries that didn't happen after death, but during life. It was a black bear. These animals are no strangers to the Smokies. Nearly 2,000 of them roam the mountains. thriving in the dense forests and endless ridges of the half-million-acre park. They're wild, but they're not usually killers. That's what made this so chilling. Black bears are shy, curious, even playful. But when food is scarce, or when humans become part of their calculation, when fear fades, they can become something else entirely. There was no food left out at Patrick's campsite, no reports of careless behavior, no warning signs anyone could see. But something changed that night. Maybe the bear was hungry. Maybe it had grown used to the scent of humans. Maybe it saw an opportunity, and Patrick never had a chance. This wasn't just scavenging. The bear didn't stumble upon a lifeless body. It created one. Officials confirmed it. This was only the second deadly bear attack in the park's history. The first was in 2000. Now, after 20 years, the unthinkable had happened again. In the aftermath, Hazel Creek Trail was closed. Rangers put up warnings, urged caution. The messages were everywhere. Travel in groups, carry bear spray, store food properly, never approach wildlife, and if a bear charges you, don't run. Stand your ground, fight. But for Patrick, it was too late. On October 5, 2022, 24-year-old Sebastian Mahia turned on a water heater in his Airbnb rental in Rio de Janeiro. He was simply trying to enjoy a warm shower after a long day. What he didn't know, what no guest could have anticipated, was that this ordinary act would end his life. Within minutes, a silent, invisible killer, carbon monoxide, filled the room. And just like that, a life filled with brilliance, purpose, and promise was stolen. Born on May 9, 1998 in Miami, Florida, Sebastian was the son of Rosa Elena Martinez Bettis and Jimmy Mejia Londoño, both immigrants from Colombia. He grew up in Miramar, where his sharp intellect and deep curiosity were evident early on. By the time he graduated summa cum laude from Palmetto Ridge High School in 2016, it was clear that Sebastian was destined for big things. He went on to attend Florida State University, where he earned a dual bachelor's degree in Latin American and Caribbean Studies and International Affairs, with a minor in Portuguese. Again, he graduated summa cum laude in May 2020, a testament to his academic drive and dedication. But Sebastian wasn't just about the books. He poured his heart into everything he did. Throughout college, he served as an English instructor and child care provider in Managua, Nicaragua, while also tutoring and teaching in Tallahassee and Naples, Florida. He volunteered with the Tallahassee Bail Fund and the Frenchtown Urban Farm. He didn't just study his community, he served it. At FSU, he also stepped up as a leader, acting as director and event coordinator for the Coalition for Latinx Studies. Sebastian was passionate about his heritage. He traced his roots to the Muisca and Panch peoples and committed himself to understanding their history and advocating for their recognition as indigenous communities in Colombia. His research took him from dusty archives to remote villages, from the Amazon to the Andean highlands. His work wasn't confined to classrooms. It lived in the communities he visited and the people he met. In spring 2021, he earned a departmental fellowship to New York University. There, he began his master's degree at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, diving deep into topics like indigeneity, capitalism, and social movements in Brazil and Colombia. By the fall, he was in Rio de Janeiro, pursuing a prestigious Fulbright Research Fellowship, collaborating with historians at the Federal University of Rio. Then came that tragic October day. In his Airbnb bathroom, a malfunctioning gas water heater began leaking carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas. The exhaust duct was damaged and incorrectly installed. The bathroom had no ventilation, no escape for the fumes, and worst of all, no carbon monoxide detector. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. Sebastian's body was discovered the next day. A police investigation confirmed what experts dread. The water heater installation violated building codes. The exhaust system was faulty. It was an accident waiting to happen, one that could have been prevented with a single carbon monoxide detector. Despite marketing itself as a company committed to safety, Airbnb doesn't require hosts to install carbon monoxide alarms. Even after Sebastian's death, the company never reached out to his grieving family. In June 2023, his parents filed a lawsuit against Airbnb in California state court, not just for justice, but in hopes of preventing another tragedy like this. But no legal victory can undo what was lost. No settlement can replace a son, a scholar, a future changemaker. Sebastian Mahia was more than a victim of a faulty heater. He was a rising star, a bridge between cultures, a champion of justice. His life mattered, and it should never have ended like this. It was July 26, 2017. Tyler Gerald and his girlfriend, Keziah Lewis, had just come from her grandfather's funeral. The Ohio State Fair, with its flashing lights, swirling rides, and cheerful noise, seemed like the perfect place to escape the weight of the morning. They wandered through the crowds hand in hand, two young people chasing just a few hours of normalcy, never imagining how quickly everything could shatter. Tyler was just 18, fresh out of high school in Columbus, Ohio, filled with dreams and pride. He had recently enlisted in the Marines, his smile beaming in a Facebook photo where he wore his new uniform and carried a plaque. Life was just beginning. As the sun began to dip, they decided to cap the day with one last thrill, a ride on the Fireball. It looked like chaos spun into art, swinging riders 40 feet into the air while spinning them at dizzying speeds. Tyler and Keziah strapped in, not knowing that this would be the last ride they would ever share. At first, everything seemed fine. The Fireball roared to life, and the crowd below cheered as riders were hurled back and forth. But then, something went wrong. A violent shaking, sharper than it should have been, rattled through the ride. Passengers felt it. Some screamed not with excitement but with fear, and then it happened. In a heartbeat, a massive section of the ride tore apart. One entire row of seats was flung into the air like a toy. Tyler was thrown with such brutal force that there was no time for a goodbye, no chance to hold on. He hit the ground with a sickening finality, his life ending instantly. Keziah, still strapped into what was left of the wreckage, suffered horrifying injuries. Her pelvis shattered, ribs broken, ankles crushed. She drifted in and out of consciousness as chaos erupted around her. Screams filled the fairgrounds, but it was too late. Tyler, full of dreams and promises, was already gone. When Keziah woke up in the hospital, she was met not just with her own pain, but with the unbearable news that the boy she loved would never walk through her door again. The shockwaves tore through Columbus. Tyler wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was beloved, respected. A young man everyone believed would make something incredible of his life. Instead, his hometown mourned a future stolen in an instant. The investigation revealed a cruel twist. The Fireball had been inspected just hours before the tragedy. Signed off, declared safe. But lurking inside the ride were structural flaws invisible to the naked eye. Fatal cracks that had grown with every spin, every swing, until the inevitable happened. Inspectors missed it. No one caught it, and Tyler paid the price. In the wake of the disaster, grief hardened into resolve. Tyler's mother, Amber Duffield, alongside devastated supporters, fought for change. They pushed for tougher laws, demanding that no other family ever suffer the way theirs had. The result was Tyler's Law, a hard-won piece of legislation aimed at making amusement rides safer, inspections stricter, and accountability unavoidable. But no law could bring Tyler back. No law could erase the hole left in Keziah's life, a young woman who would never regain full mobility, who carried her physical and emotional scars through every day forward. The Ohio State Fair eventually reopened, the rides creaking back to life under tighter scrutiny. And Hton wasn't just a visitor to the Great Smoky Mountains. She was part of them. At 73, she knew every twist in the trail, every scent in the breeze. Over the decades, she had hiked all 900 miles of the park's trails, volunteered over 4,000 hours at the Oconaluftee Visitor Center, and completed the Appalachian Trail piece by piece. She had even visited all 63 U.S. national parks, from Alaska's icy wilderness to the volcanic peaks of American Samoa. Few knew the land like she did. Fewer still loved it so deeply. So when she set off alone on a cold January day in 2025, it wasn't reckless. It was routine. Anne had done this countless times. She was cautious, prepared, always telling a trusted friend her plans. The Smokies were her backyard, her sanctuary, her second home. She parked at Smokemont Campground, shouldered her pack, and disappeared into the trees. Her plan was simple. A 2-day loop she'd done before, winding through Bradley Fork, Chastine Creek, and Hughes Ridge, eventually reaching the remote Enlow Creek Trail. It was steep, rugged, and wild. But Anne was no amateur. She had conquered worse terrain and harsher conditions. This was supposed to be just another quiet journey through the woods she knew like the lines on her palm. But Anne didn't come back. At first, no one panicked. Delays happen. Maybe she'd taken a longer route or stopped to rest. But by the second day, silence started to feel heavier. By February 1st, concern had turned to fear. Anne had been reported missing. Search teams sprang into action. Rangers, firefighters, K-9 units, volunteers, people who had worked beside her, hiked with her, learned from her, fanned out into the Smokies. They scoured ridges and ravines, combed over ice-crusted trails, calling her name into the frozen wilderness. But there was no answer, no sign, no tracks. Anne had vanished into the woods she loved, leaving nothing behind. Then, on February 2nd, they found her. She was just 4 miles off Enlow Creek Trail, in one of the park's most isolated corners. Her phone had gone dark shortly after she began. Alone and unreachable, Anne had succumbed to hypothermia. The cold had crept in silently and relentlessly, claiming even someone as seasoned and resilient as her. She died in the very wilderness that had shaped her. The news rippled through the hiking community like a tremor. It didn't seem possible. How could someone so capable, so experienced, be taken like that? But nature doesn't care about experience. The wild doesn't make exceptions. And even the most prepared adventurer can be caught off guard. For Anne's family, the loss was devastating, but not without meaning. She had died in the place she loved most, doing what made her feel alive. Her life had been built around wonder, purpose, and giving back. From her years as a special needs teacher to her tireless service in the national parks, Anne had devoted herself to others and to the land. She was more than a hiker. She was a guide, a mentor, a friend. Her name echoed on the trails and among those who had walked beside her. Park rangers remembered her as a cornerstone of the Smokies community. She had even been nominated for a National Park Service Award, a tribute to her selflessness and spirit. In early March 2025, they held a memorial for her. People came with heavy hearts, but also with stories of her quiet perseverance, her boundless curiosity, her kindness on the trail. She had always pushed herself, not for recognition, but because she believed in living fully. In the end, the same wilderness that gave her so much took her away. Her story remains not just as a loss, but as a warning, a reminder that nature, for all its beauty, is still wild, still dangerous. Even the most fearless among us can be humbled by it. Katherine Chappelle had what many would call a dream career. A brilliant visual effects editor, her work lit up the screens of millions. She helped shape the world of Game of Thrones, even earning a Primetime Emmy for her efforts on the epic Season 4 finale, The Children. Born in December 1985 in Westchester County, New York, Katherine's path took her from Hofstra University in Long Island to the vibrant entertainment world of Vancouver. She left her mark on blockbusters like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Divergent. Her talent was unmistakable, and her future in the industry was incredibly bright. But beyond the red carpets and computer screens, Katherine had another passion: wildlife conservation. In 2015, she traveled to South Africa, not for work, but to support Wildlife ACT, a conservation charity dedicated to protecting endangered species. Her mission was heartfelt: raise funds, raise awareness, and do something meaningful outside the realm of Hollywood. On June 1st, 2015, Katherine found herself in Johannesburg's famous Lion Park. a popular destination where visitors could get up close with Africa's most majestic predators. She was accompanied by a guide from Calabash Tours, and the day was shaping up to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. The sun was out, the landscape was stunning, and the lions were in view. But in one fatal moment, the day took a horrifying turn. As their vehicle approached a group of lions, Katherine did what many tourists would be tempted to do. She opened her window to snap a photo. It seemed harmless, a quick shot of the wild. But that small decision unleashed a tragedy. Without warning, a lioness lunged through the open window. The attack was swift, brutal, and shocking. Her guide, Pierre Potgieter, fought back with everything he had, throwing punches at the lioness in a desperate attempt to save Katherine. Witnesses say the lion retreated after the initial strike, blood dripping from her mouth and paws. But the horror wasn't over. The lioness returned, launching a second, even more devastating assault. Katherine was torn apart. Her face and chest were brutally mauled. The scene was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Pierre's heroic efforts came at a cost. He suffered a heart attack from the stress and trauma and was hospitalized shortly after. An eyewitness, Ben Genter, who was in the car behind them, captured a photo of the lioness just before the attack, never realizing the nightmare about to unfold. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the public. How could something like this happen, especially with a guide present? Lion Park officials insisted that all visitors were repeatedly warned to keep their windows closed at all times. It was a strict rule designed for everyone's safety, but in that fleeting moment, one open window changed everything. Katherine's family and boyfriend were devastated. At her memorial, her sister Jennifer described her as fearless, someone who embraced life without hesitation. Her boyfriend recalled warning her to be cautious, reminding her she was still a city girl in unfamiliar territory. Katherine Chappelle's tragic end serves as a gut-wrenching reminder. Even the most beautiful places on Earth can turn deadly in an instant. One moment of wonder, one misstep, and a life full of promise was gone forever. On the evening of July 19, 2013, Rosa Ayala Esparza and her family wandered through Six Flags Over Texas, soaking in the flashing lights and the electric buzz of summer excitement. It was getting late, but Rosa decided they should squeeze in one last adventure before heading home. No one knew then that this would be Rosa's final ride, forever. At 52 years old, Rosa had never been to Six Flags before. That day, she was joined by her daughter and son-in-law, strolling together through Arlington Park. When they reached the new Texas Giant, Rosa didn't hesitate. The roller coaster, a hybrid beast of steel and wood, had been revamped after the original had been plagued with safety complaints. Taller, faster, sleeker, it promised a wild rush of adrenaline. Rosa climbed into Car 3. The safety harness pulled down over her, but something didn't feel right. Passengers nearby would later recall Rosa's hesitation, her nervous glance at the restraint. She voiced her concern to a park employee, asking if it was really secure. The worker offered quick reassurance. If you heard it click, you're fine. That click was a comfort she desperately wanted to believe in. Yet some people said they hadn't heard anything at all. The ride lurched forward, up, and up again, pulling the cars into the darkening sky. Rosa's daughter could hear the screams from the riders, but something in those cries felt wrong. She turned to check on her mother, and what she saw froze her blood cold. Rosa was slipping. She was nearly upside down in her seat, her head low, her feet high, her body twisting in a way that should never happen on any ride. Passengers behind her reached out, stretching helpless hands toward her, but they couldn't reach. They could only watch, powerless, as the coaster climbed higher and higher. And then, on the third hill, the nightmare reached its climax. Rosa was hurled from the ride. Her family could do nothing but watch, paralyzed in their seats, as Rosa's body disappeared from view. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was no saving her. Rosa was pronounced dead at the scene. The impact had been so catastrophic that her body was partially severed, found tangled against a support beam above the honky-tonk tunnel, with blood and tissue scattered across nearly 75 feet of rooftop. It took firefighters an hour to recover what remained. In the days that followed, the truth began to seep out, and it was even more horrifying. Employees later admitted they had noticed Rosa's restraint wasn't as tight as it should have been. One had thought it sat unusually high. Another believed it hadn't fully locked over her thigh. Yet nothing was done. The park insisted there were no mechanical failures, pointing to their safety systems. But those systems had already malfunctioned earlier that very week, and everyone knew it. Even worse, another visitor came forward. Her daughter, she said, had ridden the new Texas Giant just days earlier, in the very same car, and had almost slipped from her seat. Her warnings had gone unheard, and now it was too late. The police ruled Rosa's death an accident. No criminal charges were filed, but for Rosa's family, no explanation could heal the raw, gaping wound left behind. They filed a lawsuit demanding accountability, demanding someone answer for the mother they lost in a few unspeakable seconds. The park reopened the new Texas Giant less than 2 months later, now fitted with redesigned restraints and seatbelts. Quietly, without fanfare, without apology. In November 2014, the family reached a settlement with Six Flags. It included a payment, but no admission of guilt, no words that could ever bring Rosa back. It was meant to be the highlight of their trip, a thrilling helicopter ride above the Great Smoky Mountains. The kind of memory you carry for a lifetime. The pilot was experienced. Everything pointed to a perfect, scenic journey. No one aboard had any reason to feel uneasy as the rotors picked up speed and the helicopter lifted into the sky on April 4, 2016. Inside the Bell 206L were 5 souls, each caught in that delicate space between excitement and awe. The pilot, 38-year-old Jason Dahl of Sevierville, Tennessee, knew the route well. He'd flown over these hills and valleys hundreds of times. Among his passengers was 49-year-old Jana Morvant, joined by her children, 22-year-old Peyton and 18-year-old Parker Rasmussen, on what was supposed to be a special family outing. Peyton's boyfriend, 21-year-old Michael Glenn Mastas, had traveled from Texas to be there. This was meant to be a joyful reunion, a rare moment of closeness between a mother and the children who'd traveled from North Carolina just to see her. The flight was only supposed to last 12 minutes. As the helicopter soared over Sevier County, the passengers marveled at the forests stretching endlessly beneath them, the winding trails and rolling hills bathed in sunlight. For a few quiet minutes, everything felt magical, until it didn't. Then, something went terribly wrong. The helicopter began to lose altitude, its descent not gradual but sudden and uncontrolled. Near a ridge just a few miles from Dollywood, the aircraft clipped the tops of trees. There was no time to recover. In a split second, the machine spun out and slammed into the hillside. Then came the explosion. The crash was violent. The helicopter flipped onto its side and erupted into flames, a massive fireball lighting up the trees as smoke billowed into the sky. People nearby heard the blast and rushed outside, only to see another burst of fire tear through the wreckage. The flames spread quickly, consuming everything in their path. There was no escape, no second chances. By the time emergency crews arrived, all 5 people were gone. What they found wasn't a crash site. It was a graveyard of twisted metal and charred earth. The helicopter had been obliterated. The fire had stripped away nearly every trace of what had been a happy, hopeful group of people just minutes before. The investigation would be long and complicated. The cause of the crash wasn't immediately clear. So much had been lost in the flames, but eventually, a horrifying truth came to light. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, a critical mechanical failure brought the helicopter down. Severe wear inside the fuel pump's drive shaft splines had gone undetected. A lack of lubrication had caused the internal parts to deteriorate until the pump could no longer deliver fuel to the engine. In mid-flight, the helicopter simply lost power. There was no backup, no warning, no way out. It didn't matter that the helicopter had passed inspections or that it had flown dozens of safe tours that very day. One hidden flaw, one missed detail, was enough to turn a dream into a nightmare. For Scott Rasmussen, the father of Peyton and Parker, the pain was unimaginable. His children had gone to visit their mother, expecting a day of smiles, laughter, and photos. Instead, they never came home. Michael's mother, devastated and in disbelief, could barely accept that her son was gone. Jana's loved ones struggled with the fact that a mother, in the middle of a joyful reunion, had died with her children by her side. And Jason, the pilot who had spent years guiding others through the skies, had gone down with the aircraft he knew so well. Lawsuits followed. Accusations of negligence surfaced. Maintenance records were scrutinized, but no amount of legal action could undo what had happened. No court decision could bring back the lives lost in those terrible 12 minutes. After the crash, safety protocols were re-evaluated. Many helicopters in the area were retrofitted with crash-resistant fuel systems. But for the families left behind, the changes came too late. In 2017, Jay Austen and Lauren Giagagan made a bold decision, one that most people only dream about. Both 29 years old and living in Washington, D.C., they left behind stable, respectable careers. Jay at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Lauren as a senior admissions officer at Georgetown University. Why? To chase a dream. To bike across the world, documenting the kindness of strangers and the beauty of humanity along the way. Their blog quickly became a hit with readers, full of vivid stories and stunning photos from their journey. They started in South Africa, pedaling through sweeping landscapes and vibrant communities. From there, they cycled across Morocco, absorbing the culture and navigating the rugged Casablanca mountains. It wasn't just about sightseeing. They wanted to live intentionally, to prove that the world is more kind than cruel. And for a while, it was. Time and time again, they were met with warmth, hospitality, and selfless acts from complete strangers. In their writing, they reflected on the goodness of people and how fear too often distorts our view of the world. One blog post stood out, an optimistic Q&A where they answered questions about the dangers of global cycling. Relatively speaking, bike touring is really safe, they wrote. The biggest danger is cars, not people. That entry would later haunt their readers. On July 29, 2018, Jay and Lauren were cycling through Tajikistan, a country known for its breathtaking mountain scenery and ancient Silk Road history. They were joined by two other cyclists, one Swiss and one Dutch. Together, the group was riding about 60 miles south of the capital, Dushanbe. Then, the unthinkable happened. A sedan sped toward them, suddenly veering off the road and slamming into the group. The impact was catastrophic, but the horror didn't stop there. The car's occupants, 5 men, got out, armed with knives, and brutally attacked the injured cyclists. It was a calculated ambush. Jay and Lauren were killed in the attack, as were their fellow cyclists. The suspects fled the scene in their blood-soaked vehicle, heading toward the Afghanistan border. But their escape didn't go unnoticed. Villagers in the remote town of Tutbo spotted the damaged car and grew suspicious. When the men ditched the vehicle, locals alerted the authorities and even followed the attackers on foot to ensure they didn't vanish into the wilderness. Soon, law enforcement caught up. One assailant was killed after resisting arrest. The next day, 3 more were found and shot during a confrontation. The final suspect, Hussein Abdusamadov, was captured alive. He was later revealed to be the group's ringleader. What came next was even more chilling. A video surfaced, recorded before the attack, in which the men pledged allegiance to ISIS. Abdusamadov showed no remorse during interrogation. His trial, held behind closed doors, ended with the harshest penalty under Tajik law: life imprisonment. Jay and Lauren's story is heartbreaking. 2 idealistic, kind-hearted people set out to prove that the world is filled with goodness, and for the most part, it was. But their journey ended in unspeakable violence, a tragic reminder that even the most inspiring adventures can carry unimaginable risks. Still, their story endures, not because of how it ended, but because of how bravely it began.